There we go.
Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Expanding the Conversation with Kofi and Richard. Today, I threw this out here because I wanted to get Kofi's insights. I'm always here to take notes, but I know that I wanted to talk a little bit about how important it is that what we think of ourselves is because I think oftentimes, like I know a lot of times they say that, well, I don't care what people think about me, which I think is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Or, I know there's a good book by Mark Manson called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F, and and those messages I think are fine. I think it's important that we detach ourselves from what other people think of us. But what I find, Kofi, sometimes that it's a struggle is that we ourselves don't define how we think about ourselves or how we want to think about ourselves. And
Right.
so that's what I wanted to talk about, right? Like how important it is for me to decide how I think
Making
about
notes.
myself, and then how do I how do I construct my life, right? Because I think this sort of, especially when we're younger, right? We're in this sort of combative mode, or we're being rebellious. Like I don't care what people think about me. I'm just going to be anything I want to be, and that's fine, I think. But how important it is that we define, you know what do we think about ourselves, and how do we pursue that thing that we want to think about ourselves as. um Probably as different discussion, but I wanted to start with how important it is that I think about what I think about myself, right? When because one of the things that I've appreciated as I got older is that life's really just about navigating what's going on in your head, right? I mean,
Mm,
that's your entire experience. Whether you want to debate that or not, it's fine. But your entire lived experience happens here. And so, how do you see the world in your mind? How do you see yourself in this world, right? How do you see yourself, and how do you want to see yourself? And how important is that versus how everybody else sees you? Because everybody else is seeing a very different you, right? Like somebody that sees you as Dr. Kofi versus when you're home, you're just daddy, right? Like you're reduced to nothing. you know, um, you get to do all the menial tasks, and you're unimportant. So the world sees different versions of us, right? But when we sit with ourselves, when we spend time with ourselves, when we reflect on who we are or who we think we are in the world that we live in, what is that, right? And the importance of, I think, defining what that thing is or who you are, I think allows you to live into it and pursue it on a day-to-day basis, and comfortably say that I don't really care what anybody else thinks about me, because I think about myself on a very high level, right? And I'm pursuing this version of myself rather than just not caring, like I'm just gonna be whatever because I don't care what people think about me. And so the balance of those two messaging, I think, as well, maybe we can touch on a little bit.
yeah. No, this is, by the way, welcome everybody. I think this is a good topic because um, there's a kind of balance I think you have to establish, right? Because the person who walks around saying that I don't care about what other people think about me um, might not benefit, right, from the input that other people can make to your life. There must be some balance there, right? So I mean, if your friend is saying, "Man, you're a little rude," right? Or, but I know that's not necessarily where we're striking this, right? But I'm just saying, just to give some clarity to it. I don't know that you're necessarily saying that we shouldn't listen to the opinions of our friends, and we should not allow sort of the influence that friends and family could have, the good influence that friends and family can have, because if you've got good friends who care for you, you're going to care about their opinion, right? You're going to care about what they think, because iron sharpens iron, as we say, so I don't know if it's at that realm, but so there's certainly a balance here, right, where yes, we do care about our friends opinions and those of our family in terms of how we relate to the world and relate to people, which I think is important, right? But I think, like you said, a lot of this is guided also by our own self view, and we making that adjustment as we go along, right? Of who we are and who we want to be in the world. And I think it's coming from that perspective that sometimes we lack a really good positive self-image and a really good positive sort of model in our head of who we are and who we want to be. And sometimes, of course, the challenge with that, there's a couple symptoms of that, right? Is either we're trying to be everybody else, right? We're trying to do and see what everybody else is doing because we lack good self view of who we are, and that becomes frustrating. That can be very frustrating when you feel like you want to be this person, you want to be that person, and then tomorrow you want to change to be something else, right? There's this sort of instability in it, and that can be very frustrating. And I think where we can find some strength and stability is spending some time to understand who we are and come to accept and appreciate us. And it starts with no perfection, right? It doesn't have to be a case where we only accept, say, what we might term to be these great things about us. It's also good to accept what we might feel about ourselves might not be so great, because then it creates these opportunities for us to say, I think I have some areas I definitely want to work on. But there is a self acceptance that this is kind of who I am, and then you could start there. That to me, sort of self acceptance and sort of self knowledge, having a good, healthy self view of who you are is a good place to start, right? To get to what you're talking about, where I am very confident in who I am, my abilities, and the things I want to achieve, to be able to build, the life that I'm trying to achieve as well. But I think it's a good place, and that's what I'd say as a start. It's a good place to start, regardless of how you might see yourself and your personality traits and the things that are going on. Because the things about ourselves we see that we want to change, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? Like you talked about before, you wanted to become somebody, you wanted to become a reader, right? And you look at yourself, I don't read enough, you know and then you begin to say, all right, that's a good honest view of self. I want to become this person who is a reader, and therefore I'm going to start doing things that get me in that direction. So I think it's kind of okay to have a starting place where we view ourselves, we make a good assessment, honest assessment of ourselves. And sometimes friends can play a role in that, right? The whole sort of blind spot test, right? Just understanding who we are. But I think once we do, I think it's a good place to start exploring and making changes in our own lives. That's what I say. So,
Yeah, so I agree with you there. It's a whole process, right? I don't think you just wake up one day and have this view of yourself, regardless of what it is. I mean, I think you're right, right? There's sort of like maybe even a recognition as we sit and think about this, of who we were, right, versus who we are now, all the things, and it doesn't matter what it is, as you said, right? There's a level of acceptance that this is who I am, right, and that's fine. But also give yourself some credit for all that you've come through, I guess, and you are today, right? That you're not like, I mean,
mhm.
I can run at a mild pace. I was never a runner, right? So I'll give myself some credit for that. I'm a runner, right? As you said. Now I started reading at the beginning of 2018. I mean, like reading things that weren't required reading, right? Or optional reading. But now I'm a reader,
Right.
and so I agree with you. I think there's an inventory, right, of all the things that I am and how I see myself, and then of course the future self. And the future self, I think, is sort of, it's important, like, to know who I see myself as now, but then also create that future self, because I think that's the person that you're gonna work towards, right? For me, I
Right.
feel like knowing, waking up every day and knowing that there's this person that Richard Bull is trying to be, and I say trying because it's a process, right? But working towards.
I didn't know you
Uh,
used to try, Richard. What are you talking about?
there is no try. But, know that this is the person that I'm aspiring to be through the things that I have to do every day, allows me to sort of at least wake up excited, right? Because somehow or the other, knowing that I can. be a better person, or be better at certain things, or work towards certain things, or love my kids more, or love my wife more, or be a better member of my community, is feels good, right? As well as like being able to enjoy my life, right? And so I think it certainly is a process. It's not a, wake up one day and you have this sort of image. I think you've got it. These A lot of this stuff is work that we have to sit down, unfortunately, with a pen and paper, and do some writing, right, and really think through it, so that we can establish what that image of ourselves should be, right, or how we should view ourselves, so that we could wake up and look at ourselves in the mirror and say, well, I'm proud of who we are now, and I'm proud of where we're heading, and I know who I am now, and I know where I'm heading, right? Because I think that allows us as well not to be triggered by small daily activities, right? So whether somebody says something to you at work, that you feel is like, oh my God, I'm a failure in life, or somebody sees you with your kids and they say, well, why are these kids so poorly behaved? And you feel like, oh my God, I'm a failure as a parent. I think knowing and having that sort of person that you're working towards allows you to almost not disregard it, right? Because as you said, I mean, some of that input is good, right? You can listen to it, but
Yeah,
also
correct.
doesn't make you sort of spiral mentally by one off comment, right? Because you recognize, even as you said, that you go through that process and you recognize your shortcomings or things that you need to be better at. You don't sort of go down the road like, I'm a failure or I'm not very good at this. It's like, okay, I hear what this person is saying. I've done my assessment. I know where I'm heading, and I appreciate it, right? But I also have a view of myself, and I'm not leaving that view up to somebody else's random opinion about a single thing in my life. The other thing I'll say as well, it's got to be sort of collective, right? It can't just be like, I want to be the world's best doctor, or I feel like it's got to be something a little bit more holistic than that in order for us to sort of wake up. As you said, it's not it's who you are, and the way everybody else views you as well is a piece of that, right? The contribution you make to different elements of your life is also part of that image, right? That version of yourself that you should think about, right? When you wake up, you say like, okay, I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy about what I think about myself, and who I am working towards, more than just all the random one-off things that may trigger you into a down a path that makes you
Yeah,
question, right? Or is either you question it and you feel like you're not very good, or you go to the other extreme and you say, well, I don't care what anybody else thinks about me. Screw them.
yeah. So there's a couple of things I would say to this, right? So the first is self-honesty. One of the things I said at the beginning of the year is learning to be honest with myself, right? That I feel like the source of a lot of healing, psychological healing, or at least again the place for a lot of psychological healing, is getting to a place where we are very honest with ourselves, just in terms of who we are, what our desires are, where we want to go, what we're struggling with. Because I think quite often, like you were saying earlier, we go through this process because we have we are sort of self-aware, right? Unlike many other creatures, we tend to humans are self-aware. So I can introspect, I can look back at myself and make assessments of myself. I can think of myself thinking of myself, right? That sort of mental experience. But as you do that, there is this sort of self-honesty, because oftentimes we don't want to accept, and I mean good and bad, and I'm not speaking of the bad only. Sometimes we fail to accept both our strengths and our weaknesses, right? We completely fail to accept our strengths. Sometimes we are good at things and we don't have a good self-image because maybe we haven't been taught this in a very powerful way, right? And there's multiple stories about people who are like sitting on sort of resident potential energy and power and have no idea of it, and they don't realize, the things that they can accomplish. So they don't have a good self-awareness of what is at their disposal. I was once told a story about a man who saved up all his money to go on a cruise ship, And when he got to the ship, he was being so frugal that he took with himself sandwiches and beverages, right? He put it in his room, and every day people would go outside to eat. He'd go to his room and eat the sandwiches. And so someone noticed this and asked him, "What are you doing, man?" I said, "I'm trying to save some money, man. I spent a lot of money to come on the ship, so I don't really have money to spend on all of these fancy meals." And the people said, "No, it comes with everything." You know, it's like the price you paid comes with everything here on the ship. So it's and sometimes we are there. It's like, humanity comes with, yes, its faults, but it also comes with this great range of capabilities and abilities. Even when you think of, where you are in life and what your role is in your family's life and in the life of your community and so forth. Sometimes we're just not aware, and I think that limits our view of ourselves, right? Because we don't really see, how powerful we can be and what an impact we can have on our own circumstances and the situation around us, right? Especially if, for example, another story of there's a story about an eagle that someone caught and trapped and put a chain around the leg of the eagle, and so they said that he was tied to a tree. And so for years, the eagle would basically go around in a circle until he almost, had this mark in the grass, right, where he would walk every day. And somebody passed by and said, "Hey, man, this poor eagle is here, and this just doesn't seem fair. An eagle is supposed to be soaring in the sky." And they came and they bought it over and removed the chains and set the eagle free. And the eagle continued to walk in the circle, right? Just because of the struggle that it had gone through in life, right? Sort of the oppression and the challenges that it failed to see, and lost this view that it was a majestic bird that could fly in the sky and this the greatest prey of the sky, And I think that can happen to us sometimes, Richard, right? We can go through difficulty in our lives. We can go through really tough situations in our lives where people convince us that we're not eagles, we're chickens, right? And that we belong on the ground, for people to throw feed at us, and that's how we must live our lives. But inside we're eagles, right? We're eagles. We can soar and we can take off. And there is this resident potential in us that we just aren't aware of. And I think part of what you're saying is that we have to get to a place where we are learning about ourselves, right? We're understanding where we are. Yes, in this case, yes, I've gone through some things. I'm struggling with some things, but here's where I want to be, right? This is what I aspire to be. I'm an eagle, and I want to be an eagle. I have nothing against chickens. They've got their purpose, but I'm an eagle. I want to soar, and I want to live this life with a particular view. And so I think it's really important that we find ourselves around people and around information, right, that really informs us, right, of who we are, and then form that self view, right, sort of realistic self view around our own capabilities and where we want to go as individuals, right, and not to see ourselves as victims or beaten down, even if we are, right, even if that's been our experience. We've got to find a way to move out from that zone and really see that we are important, right? And we should be important to ourselves and care for ourselves. We're important to our families. We're important to our community, right? And I'll say this before I close. The last thing I wanted to add: it's okay to be different. It's okay to have a self view that is different from what other people think of you, right? As I said, because I think that drives self confidence. But we must understand, like you said, how we fit into the greater picture of things. There's a scripture that says, "Have an answer for every man who comes to," and I'm paraphrasing here. "Have an answer for every man who comes to you and asks you what you believe." Right? And this was from a Christian perspective, but this idea that you should be confident in the positions and the stance that you have taken in life, and that you must be able to justify, in a sense, those position and those stance. And I think it speaks very strongly to this position of self-confidence, right? Of not wavering or being concerned about what other people believe, because I think it's important to come to the table which very strongly with what you believe and who you are and what you want to do in the world, and let others come, and then we can negotiate and talk about how we bring these things together to improve the world. But it starts with a good self view and a good justification for, I believe this in the world. I believe there's good in the world. I believe that people can change, right? And you have a good justification for what you believe, and I think that's very important overall for helping us sort of achieve our potential.
No, you make a great point there. On and I was thinking about that as you were talking about it there, on like not giving yourself credit for some of the things that you're good at, right? I remember I was back home recently. I woke up in the morning, you know, had a cup of coffee with my mother. We went to the market, we got some fruits, came back, um, went to visit a family friend, and then went to get my dad. And I was saying, I'm an efficient person. It's not even 10 o'clock, and I've gotten all these things done, right? And my dad said to me, self praise much, and it's not. I think it is, as you said, right. A lot of times, the society doesn't encourage you to speak very highly of yourself, right? Even in a small case like that, right? I feel like I'm an efficient person. I get stuff done sometimes, and the beauty about having a view of yourself, it's yours, right? And it can be a very private view. You don't need to share that with anybody else, right? You could wake up and look at yourself in the mirror and say, this is who we are, right? And you speak to yourself as in the second person there. But like have a sense of self and a belief that's yours and that's private. You don't necessarily have to share that with anybody. You don't have to give that to anybody so they could crush it, right? And say, well, no, you're not, like, you're mediocre, right? Have a view of yourself that's yours, and as you said, right, you have some basis by which you hold that view, and you know that it's sort of ever changing. But I think, yeah, you're right. It's important because a lot of times society may tell us that we ought not to feel a certain way about ourselves. But if we've got a view of ourselves, let it be ours, and it can be anything, right? I could wake up tomorrow and believe I want to be Superman. I don't have to share that with anybody. That's just my belief about myself, and I can work towards being that Superman. But I think there's a lot of value in waking up and knowing and having a view of yourself and caring what you think about you, because I think that ultimately is the most important view that one can have of self, not necessarily what everybody else is telling you.
Okay,
And,
right.
and I think they go hand in hand, Kofi. It's not to say that if you have an elevated view of yourself that you're going to walk around and people are going to think that you're no good. Right. I think as long as you do the work and you know why you feel a certain way about yourself, I think eventually they'll align, right? For the most part. So it's not to say that these things have to be at odds with each other, but I think it starts
Right.
with, what do I think about me? What do I think about me as a human being? What do I think about me as a person? What am I giving myself credit for? And what am I working towards? And I think bringing those things together. And I mean, we talk a lot about a lot of things, but most of it, the value comes from doing a lot of work in the background, right? Like sitting with yourself and thinking through, right? You talk about, you know, thinking of yourself, right? Like sitting there and going through the process, taking a pen and paper and making changes as you go. So it's not one of those things that you arrive at this view of yourself just by thinking about it. Like, you've got to write it down. You've got to be willing to spend some time,
Yeah.
fleshing it out, because I think it's valuable, because you could go back to that, right? You could ask yourself a year from now or 6 months from now, what did I think about myself, last month or 6 months ago? How has that changed? And then I think you see the progress of the work as you go through that process, right? I know
Right.
you're a process engineer, so you know about the process. But I think as you go through the process, you see the results, and so it's important to not think that it's only about thinking about yourself, but also putting some words down on a piece of paper, and
Absolutely.
analyzing that as you go. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, yeah, I will continue to work towards having a view of myself, and I hope that everybody else sees some value in this. This is just something that was on the top of my head, and I think it's important. So,
Yeah.
let
No,
us know
I
what you
think.
think. Thanks for teaching me a little bit here, Kofi. Go
No,
back to
thanks
my
for.
pen and paper and
It's actually I was making
keep
some notes,
writing.
man. No. I think it's a good topic because, and I'll say this closing. I think it's a good topic because there's a huge difference between having a great, like you said about the interaction with your father. There's a huge difference between having a positive self-image and being arrogant and being a jackass. Right? They're not the same thing. Okay, they're absolutely not the same thing. And I think the huge difference is how we relate to people, right? If you could be a humble person, so-called humble, and still be a jackass, right? Having a good self-image and positive self-image of who you are is something I think that's important to you, and it is personal to you. How you relate to people, right? Coming out of that self-image, right, is different, right? So, but you need to start with a positive self-image, right? And it doesn't include belittling others. It doesn't include okay, I elevate myself by lowering others, right? That isn't the way to sort of elevate yourself, to think of others as being less, right? That's not what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about having a positive self-image, of sort of a self-introspection and honest view of where you are and where you want to go, and feeling confident in your self and in your own abilities, and establishing that, right? Just for you as you grow in life. Your relationships with people are important. How you treat people is very important. And I think that that should be an important part of just of who you are as well, right? So they're not the same thing, and I wanted to make that distinction, because, like you said, it's something that I think a lot of us struggle with, right? We feel like we have to beat ourselves down often to make sure that we can sort of fit in or work around people, and I don't think that that's necessary.
Great.
All
All
right,
right, guys. Have a great day, everybody.
all right, you guys take care, man.